This episode is entitled The Spectral Sentinel. The moaning wind clawed at the shingles, a mournful symphony in the desolation that was the Maine wilderness. Within the cabin's feeble light, Michael, a man of numbers and projections, found himself ensnared by a growing unease. It was not the stark figures on his spreadsheets that chilled his blood, but the eerie quiet, punctuated by the wind's mournful dirge, and that low, guttural moan that seemed to seep from the very marrow of the woods. He rose slowly from his desk, the warmth of the fire a fleeting comfort against the encroaching cold. As he approached the frost-kissed window pane, his reflection shimmered back at him, a pallid ghost against the inky canvas of the night. The moan rose again, a spectral lament that sent a shiver down his spine. He peered into the Stygian depths of the woods, his eyes straining to discern any movement within the shadows. At first, there was nothing but the gnarled limbs of ancient pines writhing in the wind like spectral dancers. Then, two pinpricks of crimson fire emerged from the darkness, piercing the veil of night like the twin embers of hell. Michael's breath hitched in his throat, a cold sweat beading on his brow. He knew not what manner of creature possessed such eyes, but the malevolence that radiated from them was palpable. He felt a primal urge to flee, to seek refuge from this unknown horror. But before he could turn away, the figure emerged from the trees. It moved with an unnerving fluidity, its form shifting and distorting, as if it were composed of smoke and shadow. It floated towards the cabin, a spectral wraith gliding on the currents of the night. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs, his mind scrambling to comprehend the impossible sight before him. Was it a phantom, a figment of his fevered imagination? Or was it a harbinger of doom, a specter sent to claim his soul? As the figure drew closer, its form began to coalesce, taking on the vague outline of a human figure. But it certainly was not human. Its limbs were elongated, torso contorted, its head a grotesque caricature of a man's face. Michael's blood ran cold. He had heard tales of the Wendigo, the malevolent spirit of the north that preyed upon the lost and lonely. Could this be the creature of legend, drawn to his isolated cabin by his growing despair? The figure paused at the edge of the clearing, its crimson eyes locked onto Michael's. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him, a sickening dread that gnawed at his sanity. And with a sudden burst of adrenaline, Michael bolted from the window. His heart pounding in his ears, he stumbled through the darkened cabin, fumbling for the door. His fingers grasped the cold iron latch, but before he could throw it open, a bone-chilling cold enveloped him. He spun around, his eyes widening in terror. The figure stood in the doorway, its grotesque form filling the frame. Its eyes burned with a malevolent light, its elongated fingers reaching out to grasp him. Michael screamed, a primal cry of terror that echoed through the empty cabin. He stumbled backward, his legs giving way beneath him. He collapsed to the floor, his back pressed against the cold stone hearth. The figure advanced, its movements slow and deliberate. It reached out its skeletal hand, its fingers brushing against Michael's cheek. He could feel the icy chill of its touch, the deathly aura that emanated from its very being. It was as if his life force was being sucked from him, his soul being drawn into the abyss. He tried to scream, but the voice was caught in his throat. He could only watch in horror as the figure leaned closer and closer, its fetid breath washing over his face. The last thing he saw was the creature's grotesque grin, its teeth bared in a mockery of triumph. Then darkness consumed him. Michael awoke a little while later with a gasp, his body drenched in sweat. The fire had died down to embers, casting the cabin in a flickering half-light. He lay there for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest, trying to discern reality from nightmare. The wind still moaned outside, but the guttural cries had ceased. Had it all been a dream? A cruel trick of his sleep-deprived mind? He rose unsteadily, his legs trembling. As he approached the window, a fresh wave of terror washed over him. The crimson eyes were still there, burning in the darkness. The figure was gone, but the eyes remained, fixed upon him with a malevolent intensity. Michael staggered back, his mind reeling. He had to get out of here, to flee from this place of shadows and evil. But as he turned to run, the door slowly creaked open, and a blast of icy air filled the cabin. The creature was back. It slithered into the room, its form shifting and distorting like smoke. Its eyes glowed with a predatory hunger, its elongated limbs reaching out once again to ensnare him. Michael knew that he couldn't fight it. He had to escape. But the creature was faster, stronger. It lunged at him, its skeletal fingers closing around his throat. He struggled to breathe, his vision blurring. He could feel the icy touch of death slowly creeping over him. But then, as the creature's grip tightened, a blinding flash of light filled the room. The creature screamed in agony, its form dissolving into a cloud of smoke. Michael collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. He lay there for a moment, his body trembling, his mind reeling. When he finally dared to open his eyes, he saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, her face shrouded in a shadow. She held a lantern in one hand, its light casting a warm glow across the room. "Are you all right?" she asked. Michael nodded, his voice still choked with fear. The creature," he whispered. "It's gone." "Yes," the woman said. "It's gone, but will return. It always does." She knelt beside him, her hand gently touching his face. "You have to leave," she said. "Leave this place and never come back." Michael looked into her eyes, and he saw a depth of wisdom and compassion that he had never known. He knew she was right. He had to leave. He rose slowly to his feet, his legs shaky. Grasping the table, he thanked the woman for her help, but she was already gone, vanished into the shadows as quickly as she had appeared. Michael quickly gathered his belongings and fled into the night, and never looking back, but he could still feel the creature's eyes burning into his back. He knew that he would never forget the horror of that night. He had seen the face of evil, and it had changed him forever. He had learned that there were things in the world far more terrifying than any company report, and he learned that sometimes the only way to escape the darkness is to flee from it. But he also knew that he would never truly be free. The darkness would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike. He had seen the face of evil, and it had marked him for life.